So for those that have the baby turbo, the 140, we can do one better maybe by having a variable pitch propeller. Now, it's very similar to all of the systems. Now, if you are upgrading and you have to install it yourself, or if you're doing maintenance to it, this is how it works. This piece right here is a pivot block for the arm that goes behind the gearbox. Usually in previous installations, this was part of one of these spacers. Well, in this case, we did it a little differently. We already have spacers. This is separate from the gearbox. So this is now tapped internally, 14 by 1.25 thread. You can actually kind of see the thread right there. There you see it. And then a 14 millimeter bolt is used to hold it in place. So initially, just put a couple of drops of blue Loctite, screw that in by hand until this is aligned, and then that is, the arm is already attached with the bearing washer, nylon washer, top, bottom, and underneath, and then tighten this so that you can barely move it, and then back it off a tiny bit so that it moves freely but no play. And then tighten this by hand for now. We're going to go back and tighten it to 40 foot-pounds eventually. Now on the other side is where the motor is. We, again, in this case, we did use a block that's also a spacer for the gearbox, and it is set in a way, as far as height, that the back of it aligns with the push rod from the engine. You don't have a push rod in here now, but you can see that's where the push rod would come out, and that would split the difference on this 1/2 inch thick bar. And we're going to have a drill going through here, a 5/16 extended drill, and we're going to spot face a little point on this arm right in the middle when the travel is halfway and the bar is parallel to the back of the gearbox. That little spot face, or that little dimple we use with the drill, is now going to become the pocket that the shaft, the 1/4 inch shaft that drives the gearbox, is going to sit in, and that's going to be pointed. On this side, this system uses this box with the slide in it. So this now has a little bit of a slide that it can move back and forth, and you can take a brush and put a tiny bit of grease on this when it moves back and forth. It has some lubrication. This bolt, again, goes through, tighten it down, and then back it off a tiny bit so that everything has just a little bit of play so that it can move back and forth and not bind. Back here, there's a bracket that holds the rear of this actuator. That bracket is mounted using 2 of the intake manifold screws. You can get to those. One you can get to right through here, and one is right there. So you take that out and put the bracket on, and then tighten it to 120 inch-pounds. Sometimes it's easier to actually put the bracket onto the motor ahead of time and then push everything up in there and put those bolts in. Again, same with this, it's a pivot point, so you tighten it down and then back it off just a tiny amount, and then that is free to move. Now let's watch the system move back and forth. I'm going to apply 12 volts to it, and we'll watch the actuator go. And then we're going to go the other way. As you see, it's a very small amount that it actually has to move to change propeller pitch. Now it's going to go back halfway, so we're going to count to 3. 1, 2, stop. And that's about halfway. That's where it's going to be when we spot drill this, so that it becomes as close to the center of the travel as we can get. Now, that's really it as far as the operation of it. Use a 1 amp fuse for this driver, and if for some reason that's not enough, you can go to a 2 amp, but 1 should be plenty. Good luck installing it, and don't forget to tighten this after it's all done. Now, one last little thing that I forgot, I knew there was something. If when you tighten this, and this is not able to move up and down freely in this tiny bit of slop in this here, that means that not only did you tighten the bolt, but you also rotated this part behind it a little bit. So you can feel free to tighten it and then take a brass punch and a hammer and just tap this back down again until you get your play back over here. Just so that everything moves as freely as possible without any binding.